So it's been a little over 3 weeks since I applied the longest full coverage jelly tips, which I had so much fun creating. Now I have to make a decision. I either fill them or remove them. What should I do? Some things you should know. Let's get started. Introducing Suzie's Quick Tips. Combined with acrylic, no lamp, no sculpting, no shaping needed. Available at nailcareer.com. So a full coverage tip basically looks like this. You get it in a package and you apply it by pressing it on with either acrylic, gel, hard gel, or glue. And that's what I did about 3.5 weeks ago with these. So now they've grown out. Generally, when you're applying a full coverage tip like that, it's most likely for a user who doesn't know how to sculpt, hasn't learned, because it's quite a craft to learn. It's quite an undertaking, right? So these are very convenient to put on and you can quickly get a set of nails. But now they've grown out, now what do you do? So if you don't have the skill to fill, you've got to remove them. But I'm going to try to give you a little bit of skill so you can fill them quickly, because removing them is a lot of work to remove and then reapply a set again. In my opinion, you can get one fill out of it, and I'm going to explain that to you. Right now, I'm going to remove one finger so we can take a good look at it and see if we should fill or remove. There are a few telltale signs to tell us what we should do with it. So let's check it out. So I've got a layer of chrome and gel on there, you can see. And I'm just going to buzz off this gel polish real quick, okay? So I've almost got all the stuff off, and you can see it came off pretty quick. But when you're filing it off, you know, usually we soak gel polish off. But if you soak gel polish off, it's also going to soak this off. So keep that in mind. If you soak, it's not just going to take off the gel polish. It's going to take off the whole thing. So I'm just going to show you around the cuticle. So at this point is I have to make a decision now. Is this worth filling, or is this far enough grown out that I shouldn't be, and that I should just be taking it off and putting a new one on? So that might be the decision that you're faced with. But as you can see, it's a lot of work, of course, to take it off and then put a new set on, but it's a bit of work in filling it too. So first, let's decide what needs to be done. So I'm just going to remove this so you can see, and hopefully you can see. It's kind of hard to tell between fake nail and natural nail to decide if you're going to fill it or not. Okay, so let's get a good look at this. So do you ever notice sometimes your salon might call it a nail fill or a rebalance? The reason being is the longer a nail is, the higher the apex must be. And the apex is this area in here. These nails, these super long nails, it's different with these ones, but these super long nails, can you see how high the apex is? You see that? They're very, very high in here. That's so a lot of product can sit in there. And then when it sits on your nail, it has a high apex to stop it from breaking. That causes strength, right? So the decision we have here is the apex in the right spot? If it's still in the right spot-ish, then you could just gently fill it at the cuticle. But if it's not in the right spot, you want to take them off and do it again, so that when you do it again, if you remove this guy, you're going to take this finger nail, this fake nail, when you put it back on again, it sits right here right now. You're going to be putting it back toward the cuticle to give it the better apex point. The more the apex gets over on this end of things, let me turn sideways. It was back here 3 weeks ago. Now it's up here. And in a couple more weeks, it's going to be over here. So do you see how the high point here is now further on the nail? And then 3 more weeks, it's going to be down here and here and here and here. The more it grows down here, the heavier it becomes on this end. And the longer the nail is, the more chance you have of it breaking and popping this way, or cracking across and taking your natural nail with it. So that's why it's crucial to make a decision whether we're going to fill it or we're going to remove it. Now, if I'm a nail technician and with a lot of skill, you're going to fill it if the person wants their nails that long again. You're definitely going to fill it, but that's when you would do the rebalance, which means you would take the thickness out of here and you would reapply it all up toward the more nail estate cuticle end and get more nail estate so it's gripping onto that end so we have a nice even balance. So the longer the nail is, the higher the apex has to be to give it that strong balance so they won't break. But if you don't have that skill, this is what you're faced with. You put these on a month ago, let's say, 3 weeks ago, and now you're faced with this nail. So if you think you want to try to fill it, which I advise if you're going to fill it, just do it once if you're not skilled to know about the apex. So this time we can get away with filling it without readjusting or doing a rebalance for the apex. But I suggest you just do it once.
Okay. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is you could do it more than once if you're using acrylic or builder gel and not a tip. But when you're using tips, it's because you can't just easily move the apex.
That's right, because the apex is already built in.
Right, so the whole nail has to then come off if it's
unbalanced. Now if you were skilled enough, you probably wouldn't use these to begin with. You would just build it from scratch. So when the client came in, you could do the rebalance. I don't think you could do a rebalance so much with these, because I think if you dug through and took away the apex that's leaning toward the free edge, if you started to take that down, you're going to run into the gel that's underneath, and the tip and the gel the layers in between might not be able to be smoothed out, and then you're piling more product on top, which is great if you want to do that. But now you're getting into the whole sculpting and that end of it. But these tips are meant to be able to just put on with no skill, basically, and that's not offense to anybody who is doing this for a living, because many people can do a manicure themselves. It's not that difficult, but they don't want to. They want to go in and have a nice service. They can color my hair, but I like to go in and have a nice service and have it done professionally. That's why your nail technician may soak and take them off, because they are just doing this as a quick service for you. But if you're doing this yourself at home and you don't have those options for skills, yes, the recommendations from this company in particular was Nail Couture. When I put these on, he suggested you remove them by soaking them and you put a new one on. And I do recommend that. But if you do have a little bit of skill and you want to just be able to put a little bit in the back here, some calls it a backfill, then you can do that, because the apex is still relatively within my safe zone, in my opinion. You could get away with it for another week or two. But if it grows off maybe another 3 or 4 weeks and it gets too far, then it's a little bit in question. So good catch, cameraman. And if you don't know how to do a fill, well then, maybe it's something you don't want to attempt. But if you're putting these on and you're kind of getting a bit of a groove doing nails at home, you might want to have a little advice on how you could actually do a little tiny backfill. And that is, sort of the first steps of trying to do your own nails and starting to sculpt a whole nail. So I'm just going to clean up the cuticles and show you what that looks like. Because if you are doing yourself, one thing you really do want to know is you have to take up any lifted part. So you're sort of doing a little mini course here on doing a little mini fill. So the question of this video was, should I fill or not? If you want to try these skills, then go ahead and try it, but just do it once when you're talking your full coverage jelly tips. But if you don't want to attempt this, then I suggest you soak them off or file them off and reapply a whole new set. But if you just want to try one little fill, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'm just prepping this right for the fill. I'm going to get my arbor band bit. You can do this by hand or you can do this with an e-file. It's the same result. And I'm just going to buff the cuticle area and push back my cuticles to get as much nail estate as I possibly can for that fill. Now, if I have more than this area to fill, I wouldn't do this. I would take them off and reapply them. If you have more of this space, then you're talking, you have a much bigger area that you're trying to fill. And the apex is in the wrong spot. And all I'm doing is I'm not rebalancing this. I am just taking a fill in the back fill and blending it into the already apex that's in the position that I want it to be. Okay, so that is prepared now for the fill. Okay, so let's fill it. I'm gonna just put this on my tube so it's nice and balanced. Okay, so I've removed all the product that I can just in the little area that we want to fill. And I'm going to put my prep and prime. You need a dehydrator and you need a primer. And that's so that the dehydrator cleans it and dehydrates it. And the primer will prepare it like a sticky tape, like an adhesion layer for the product to stick. And if you're going to use acrylic, you can use acrylic or gel or hybrid gel. In this case, I'm going to use acrylic. And I'm going to use a slow acrylic. And I chose that because I figured if you're not really skilled at doing this, a slow acrylic could certainly make your life so much happier when it comes to applying acrylic. Okay, so I'm going to get my brush. Now the trick with slow acrylic is use virtually no monomer. You just get your brush all happy and saturated, get all the air bubbles out and stuff, and then literally drain the product out of your brush. Use virtually none. It seems kind of weird, but yeah, you use hardly any. And now you want to get your powder. And I'm going to use my foundation pink because I want you to be able to see it. If I don't use that, if I use it like a light pink or a clear, you may not be able to see it. So I'm going to use a little bit more of a tinted colored so you can actually see what I'm doing. Oh, let me just get a little towel to absorb any monomer. So if you've worked with traditional at all, if you've worked with any acrylic at all, you'll find that traditional is the most popular because nail technicians are very accustomed to it. But if you're learning, there's nothing like an odorless. So I'm going to just go into the monomer, soak it. You drain most of the monomer out of your brush. And then you are going to lay it into the powder. I like to just sit in there. I don't like to pat or drag or pulse or anything. I just like to hold it in there about 6 seconds. And then you want to lay that bead on. And this is excellent when you're first learning because doing a liquid to powder is very difficult. And then you let it absorb into itself, and then you pat it, mold it down where you want it to be, and then simply blend it out and fade it into that apex. That's all you're doing. We are not here to change the apex at all. All we want to do is blend into it, because we want to fill this nail the easiest way possible. And in my opinion, the easiest way is with the acrylic, the slow setting monomer. See, look at that. I'm blending into the apex. That's all we did. We just added that little area so it doesn't, because the reason why we want to fill it is because it looks really bad, right? You put nail polish or gel polish on, and you can see this natural nail, and then it bumps up to your product. So we're trying to blend from the cuticle area to that bump. We're trying to create that little bridge, you might say. And that's all we had to do. Okay, so if you're examining your work before you decide to go any further to start to sculpt, you may see that there's a hairline, little tiny gap between the natural nail cuticle area and where you're starting to apply your acrylic. You can go in and do a little tiny, we're talking a microscopic bead here. But unless you're really skilled with the liquid and powder, I wouldn't bother adding that little guy in there because you can smooth that out with the file, hand file, basically. So I would probably leave that if you're not super skilled to do that. If you're just looking to fill that in there, I think that that is absolutely sufficient. We'll just file it nice and smooth in the cuticle. In some ways, you might even want to leave that gap all the way around just to make sure that you can get at it. That would be advisable if you're first learning. Okay, so this is pretty much dry now. So with odorless, if you're working with an odorless system, you can run it under warm water to get rid of that dispersion layer. This is what helps it not smell. Or you can just roll the top layer off with your file, hand file, and then you can start filing. It takes a little bit longer to dry. It's a slower setting, which is a huge advantage when you're trying to learn how to sculpt with acrylic. Okay, we'll let that dry, and then I'm going to run it under warm water for about 30 seconds, and I'll meet you back in here so we can sculpt it and make it seamless to that apex. Okay, so I've got my course file, and again, I can't emphasize enough, I'm only working on this area here, right? Just the area where I applied the product. I don't want to go into the apex or the rest of the nail because that's going to change the shape of that tip that's meant to be intact. We don't want to file any of that away. If we do that, we're getting into a whole new realm of sculpting. Okay, so I'm just going to focus on that cuticle area because it's hard to tell what I'm actually filing on camera. You can see the dry, dusty parts. I'm only working in this area here, just where I filled in the cuticle. So this is when you really want to look at it sideways and see. You want to make sure that when you apply, when you're doing your filing, you're just filing into that apex and just feathering it into the already existing apex. You're not wanting to change that apex at all. So just file, really, I guess, just file the product that you applied. That's it. So if you didn't put it on very smooth, that's okay. That's all part of the learning process. Just file the area you applied as smooth as you can. And then I'll show, don't worry about the rest of the fake nail, the fake tip part. Don't worry about that part. Just file your product as smooth as you can. And then I'm gonna get a sanding sponge. And again, just going over that area that you applied. You know, it looks awful because it looks like I'm filing the whole thing, but I swear to you, I'm not. I'm just filing the part that I put in there. Okay, see that? Now this won't change your shape. This is a specific sanding sponge that has a bit of a grit on it. So it'll smooth the product that you're working with, but it won't change the shape. Basically because it's very bendable. You can see how bendable it is, right? It's not hard like this. This will change the shape because it's giving resistance, but this doesn't have much resistance. So it will just smooth the surface as opposed to changing shape. So this you can go over top of the whole thing. And now you are blending the little area in the cuticle into the rest of the nail. Now you're blending the whole thing and you won't change the shape of that tip. Now you can go over the whole thing. Now, I don't know if you can see the difference. I'll try to get rid of the dust here. Let me see if I can put the dehydrator on. Oh yes, look at that. With the dehydrator on, you can see it much clearer. It's starting to dry up already. See how this is the product that we put on, and this is where the apex is beginning now, and this is not where any product that I've just put on now is not there. I only just filled and blended into the apex just to buy you that little extra time between replacing these and completely, right? That's all we did. So I'm just going to go over it with my Smooth and Shine. And this is just for the photo so you can see the after. Maybe compare the before and after. And on the white side of this particular sponge, you can make it quite shiny. Okay. Oh, get a bit of oil on there. Massage that in. Now, I'll massage a little bit more away because when it's really oily, it's really hard to see sometimes the reflection of light. Okay. Okay, get a look at that now, right? So that whole area, this little peachy kind of a color, is all filled in here. And now we have a smooth finish. And you can extend another 3 weeks. But I do recommend after that, you might want to soak them off and totally replace the nail once again. Let's take a look at the pictures. So to recap, this is after gel polish is removed and nail is prepped for a fill. Here is after, filled. You can see it's slightly a different pink. And now the side angles. You can see it doesn't look like much of a difference, but it's huge when it comes to nails. This will give it the strength it needs, or you may suffer a bad break. So the reason why I recommend that you only do this once, only fill that little cuticle area once, is because the apex is going to be so out of position. You really need to soak these nails off and put a whole new set again on so that the apex is in the right spot for strength. Because when that apex gets too far off, you take a chance of breaking your natural nail, and it could be pretty nasty. So save yourself the hassle. As for the rest of these nails, that's my next video. I'm going to remove these ones. They desperately need to be taken off or filled, one or the other. And if you want to catch how I applied these nails, check this video out. I had a lot of fun putting these on. Check it out.